What'd you shoot? How'd you score? How many over? We golfers pay so much attention to scores, both our own and others, even though they only tell a fraction of the story of how well or badly we've played on a given day. But there's another number which can give us the full picture, and which we really should be focusing on instead. First, I told you your handicap was lying to you. Now it's your golf scores. What's next? I'm going to say that your wife and her personal trainer aren't just good friends? But in just the same way that the fluctuations in your handicap don't necessarily tell the whole story when it comes to your progression as a golfer, so it is that paying too much attention to your scores can be misleading when it comes to analysing the standard of your play. For one thing, your gross number doesn't reflect your score to par. A 79 on one course could be 7 over, whereas it could be 12 over on another, but that's actually not what I'm talking about in this video. What I want to talk about instead is the crucial importance of score differential. So first things first, what is score differential? Well, as we can see from the USGA,
a score differential measures the performance of a round in relation to the relative difficulty of the course that was played, measured by the course rating and slope rating. The result of the daily playing conditions calculation is also included in the score differential calculation, which may provide an adjustment if course and/or weather conditions significantly impact scores on that day. A score differential is calculated using the following formula.
Okay, so what does that actually mean? Essentially, score differential is a much more accurate gauge of how you played on a given round of golf, taking all the conditions into consideration. Now, I'll come back to that in a sec, but there are a lot of terms in there and an equation, so let's just quickly define and run through a few of those. Firstly, course rating. This time per the R&A.
Course rating is calculated from the effective playing length and obstacle factors for 9 or 18 designated holes. The course rating is expressed in strokes to 1 decimal point and represents the expected score for a scratch player.
So that last bit is really all you need to know. The course rating is how many shots a scratch player is expected to go around a course in. It's not necessarily the same as par, but it effectively represents how difficult a given course is for a scratch golfer. So if you see something that is a 77.2, that is a harder course for a scratch golfer than something that is a 69.8. As far as slope rating goes, also per the R&A,
the difference between the course rating and the bogey rating is used in the determination of the slope rating.
Bogey rating? Well, that's a new one. It's not actually in the score differential calculation. So what is bogey rating? Bogey rating represents the expected score for a bogey player. So course rating represents the expected score for a scratch player. Bogey rating represents the expected score for a bogey golfer. And by the way, a bogey golfer is defined as a 20 handicap for men and a 24 handicap for women. And the slope rating is representative of the difference between those two scores. Now, there's quite a lot of terms. Essentially, slope rating measures the same thing as course rating, just in a different way. It measures how difficult a golf course is. This time for a bogey golfer rather than a scratch golfer, but a higher number indicates a harder course. So a 136 is harder than a 123, is harder than a 113. As you can see from the R&A, a golf course of standard relative difficulty has a slope rating of 113. So that is essentially baseline average. And then the final thing that goes into this slightly convoluted equation for your score differential is the playing conditions calculation, or PCC. Per the R&A, this is
the statistical calculation that determines if conditions on a day of play differed from normal playing conditions to the extent that they significantly impacted players' performance. Examples of conditions that could impact players' performance include course conditions, weather conditions, and course setup.
What this is saying is basically if there was a 50-mile-an-hour wind or all the pins were tucked 2 inches off the corner of the green, then the players who played that golf course on a given day would likely shoot higher and vice versa. So if a course is playing very, very tough or very, very easy, that will actually be reflected in your score differential at the end of the day. This number ranges from a -1 to a +3, 0 being a normal day, -1 being a course that played easier than normal, and then +1, 2, or 3 being a course that played harder than normal to those degrees, 3 being the highest, because it's the highest. Just to give you an idea of how often this tends to be a factor in your score differential, in the 75 rounds that I have logged through my handicapping app, I have seen 8 playing conditions calculations come into effect. 3 of those have been negative, indicating that the course played easier, and 5 have been positive, indicating that it played harder. I've only seen 1 +3, and I can't remember what it was like that day, but I'm sure it was very difficult.
raining sideways!
Just quickly, if you are enjoying the video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel. I am putting out new videos along these lines and of my own personal golfing journey every week. And do follow me on Instagram @GolfLifeCrisis for more day-to-day updates. Right, so take all of those numbers, then take the actual number you wrote on your scorecard on a given day, and you can work out your score differential. Why is this important? Why have we gone through all of this? Well, for a variety of reasons, some of which are obvious, some of which might be less so, or certainly the extent to which this can matter. And just to say, no one's expecting you to go away and do all of this maths on your own. If you use the Gin app or the My England Golf app or any number of other apps out there, all of this stuff will be done for you. You just put in your score and it will tell you what your score differential was. Thank heavens for that. But this number is crucial if we want to actually look at how we've played on a given day, rather than what the gross score suggests, or rather than how we feel coming off of a round. We all know some of this instinctively. We know that some courses are hard and some courses are easier. We know that playing off the back tees tends to be more difficult than playing off the up tees. But how much more difficult is it? And just how much harder is course A than course B? Well, score differential crystallizes this and gives you the actual numerical answer. It all means that a 90 is not a 90 is not a 90. A given number can be very different depending on where you played that day. We can look at this with a pretty stark example from a couple of rounds that I played in the earlier part of this year. On paper, and in reality, I shot a 94 on both of those rounds. However, once we dig into the score differential, we can see that these two rounds were not created equal. One was actually perfectly okay relative to my handicap, and one was really as bad as it looked. In the first of these rounds, I was just playing at my home course off the regular members tees. The course is fairly average in terms of difficulty. It's a slope rating 132, and it measures about 6,100 yards. The 94 I shot on that day gave me a 20.7 score differential, which is pretty ugly. However, a few weeks later, I was lucky enough to play at JCB Golf Club, where I also shot a 94. But if we dig into the differential here, we see a completely different story. This time I was bullied into playing off the back tees, the course was well over 7,000 yards, and it is just a much sterner test of golf. What that all meant was that when the 94 came out in the wash, it equated to just a 14.6 differential, 6.1 strokes lower than the exact same gross score on a different course from a different tee box. That is the extent to which score differential can vary from course to course or tee box to tee box or gross score to gross score. And that is why it's so important to track. So in the same way that handicaps can lie, and that's why it's important to take a look at other numbers such as your anti-cap, so can scoring averages lie, or even scores to par. If you base your progression or perceived lack thereof on these numbers, you can quite easily get misled. If you start playing at harder courses or playing from harder tees, you may end up shooting the same gross numbers and feel like you're stuck. But the reality could be very, very different. And it could actually be vastly different rather than just thinking, oh, I'm just playing off the back tees. There could, as we've seen, be 3, 4, 5, even 6 or more strokes different in the same gross number. Sometimes higher scores are actually better scores when you take all the conditions into consideration. So if you want to get a more accurate picture of your level of play and your progression as a golfer, start looking at score differential rather than just score, as it's a far more accurate representation of those things. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. And if you did, you will definitely enjoy this video I did about how your handicap is lying to you, even though I'm sure your wife definitely isn't.